The question is that the House has considered the EU-UK summit. Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Well, this will go down as a week in parliamentary history as the week of the greatest surrender, bookended by today our valuable freehold is being surrendered. The Chagos Islands, where there will be a statement later, and the beginning of the week, our valuable freedoms won from the European Union through the joys of Brexit is being surrendered. And I think many members of the British public will be confused because last week the government was talking about the joys of the freedoms of Brexit to be able to do trade deals with India, trade deals with the United States. And all of a sudden this week it has gone back to the fog of surrender by handcuffing ourselves very close to the European Union. Now there's a rule in business which has been deployed many times by parliamentarians that nothing is agreed till everything is agreed. And normally with the EU there's always a last-minute drama. But this time was different because what happened was little was agreed and everything was conceded. Yeah, that's it. That's the bottom line, Madam Chair. Little has actually been agreed and everything has been conceded in an extraordinary act of surrender where basically it's that, to use another expression, it's the thin end of the wedge. And the EU can't believe their luck in that they've opened the door, they've stuck the little wedge in there, and they've now got lots of things that they are still negotiating on. And every time they're going to say, well, you've got to agree this before we move on to the next one. We've heard it all before, and yet this government has learnt nothing. So we know that the first surrender is very dear to my own constituents in Boston, my fishermen, who are absolutely raging furious because they assumed that after the end of this first phase deal, then more quotas would be negotiated back to the UK, they would be beneficiaries, and that we would be taking back more control of our waters. Instead, it's all been conceded for 12 years. It's gone. I'm most grateful to the Honourable Lady for intervening.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Aren't his fishermen pleased that the market that they were trying to export fish to, which was often turning that fish back because of the massively complicated controls, they have now got open to them again? We were not eating that fish in the UK and it was rotting too often.
I'm most grateful to the Honourable Lady, to which I say no. They haven't mentioned that at all, and nor have any of the major logistics firms in my constituency mentioned once about the delays, the so-called delays at the border. This surrender of fishing is completely and utterly inexcusable, and nothing has been gained in return. And then, of course, the second big surrender is that apparently we've negotiated theoretical access to some future EU defence fund, but we don't know how much access. All we know is that we're going to have to pay a whole load of cash, but we don't know how much cash. It's all got to be negotiated in the future. So little's been agreed and everything has been conceded. The Honourable Lady is most busy.
On the defence industry, we have some of the best defence industries in the world in the UK. I am disappointed that I think we're fellow patriots of this country, that he wants to downplay our ability to actually access this money and support UK businesses and jobs.
What I said was, if you're going to agree a deal, agree the terms of the deal. Don't just say that you're going to you'd like to have a bit of the action, and please tell me how much it's going to cost me later, and I've no idea how much of the action I will get. That's a terrible deal. And we all know that no deal, Madam Chair, is better than a bad deal. But don't worry, let's move on to Surrender 3, shall we? Surrender 3 is, of course, the issue of becoming a rule taker. So the Honourable Member for Walthamstow referred to the agri-foods, the SPS deal, and that all sounds very good until you realise that actually, well, so now we've got to take a whole load of extra rules that we have no input in whatsoever from Brussels under a process called dynamic alignment that quite possibly would mean we couldn't do any further trade deal with a great nation like the United States, instead of arguing for mutual recognition, which of course can exist between nations who have excellent standards of food and products, which we have, of course. So 3 great surrenders, and it seems to me that we have gained nothing there. Indeed, we'll probably have to pay more if we want any more rules to be given to us. Why would we do that? Why would we pay more when we've given ourselves the freedom to not have to pay anymore? We thought we'd done all of that. But then again, if we're not content with that, what about surrender 4? This is the big one. And I think the Minister himself earlier this year said, don't worry, chaps. No plans for any form of youth mobility scheme. Well, it turned out the Minister was right, because some clever person rebadged it. I've got an idea. Let's call it a youth experience scheme. Well, I'm sure it's a lovely experience. But when you're 30 years old, are you still a youth? Or is it a middle-aged experience scheme? And during the negotiation, I can see what will happen, because this hasn't been concluded. This will become an old age experience scheme. And then what will happen is that someone will say, but hang on, if it's an old age experience scheme, we haven't got the workers in the care homes to look after the old age people from the EU who've come over to our glorious care homes. So then we'll have to have more freedom of movement and dependence, because this is still open-ended. We don't know the age of the youth experience scheme. We don't know the duration of the youth experience scheme. We have no idea about the number of youth experience. I'm hoping I will still qualify for this scheme at the age of 60. Of course I will give way to the...
I, like him, share a burning desire to still be considered young and, alas, have to face the brutal reality. But I just wonder if he has such similar concerns about the 13 other youth mobility schemes that we have with countries around the world. Does he fear the Australians, the New Zealanders, the Canadians, the Japanese, the Uruguayans who come on a youth mobility scheme in the same way that he does Europeans? Or is it that he thinks they're younger and fitter than him?
Well, they may well be younger and fitter than my good self, and I'm most grateful. But the truth is, actually, proximity is a big difference. But the concerns of my constituents in Boston, which has received a very significant quantity of net immigration from East European, they haven't seen any Australians in Boston and the likes. And I think there is a proximity issue there. But surely it must be right. If you're going to agree a deal, then agree the terms of the deal. But we don't know the numbers, we don't know the cap, we know absolutely nothing, we don't really know the duration of this. And so we're completely and utterly at the mercy of the European Union. And I have to say, to anybody in this place, spend a day with me in sunny Skegness. Knock on 1,000 doors with me, and I promise you not a single door. The first thing they will say to you is, I want a youth experience scheme for Johnny or Judy. Not a single one of them will say that. Of course, I'll be delighted to give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I thank the Chair for announcing me. With anything, the terms of when the terms are unclear, of course, the big risk is the unintended consequences. With over 60 million people in the EU under 30, would my honourable friend agree with me that the unintended consequences here, given that this scheme does nothing for the immigration issues we're already facing, could be quite severe?
Well, this is the point of the honourable member is bang on, because under 30, you've got some tens of millions. Is it 60 million? Is it 70 million? Who knows? But it is a sizable number. And we know that we have huge pressure on our housing. We have a determination to increase wages for British citizens. We've got pressure on our healthcare. So actually, the British people have clearly expressed just a couple of weeks ago in some elections, when they backed Reform UK's net immigration policy of net zero, they said, actually, we quite like that, which is why, of course, we did so well. So I think that there may be a sort of a loss of the ability to listen to the concerns of the British people. I'd be most delighted to give way to my neighbouring MP.
Well, indeed, and I can confirm I've never been an Australian or a Canadian in Boston or in Spalding, actually. But leaving that to one side, isn't the real challenge of this, the real threat of this, even more sinister than the honourable gentleman suggests? Because we have, stubbornly, a huge number of young people not in education, employment, training. In fact, the trend is slightly up. It is a tragedy that those people are trapped without either jobs or learning to get jobs. They will inevitably be competing with people from abroad for those early opportunities to work. young people who we need to back. And I do fear that unless we get absolute clarity on the length of time and the character of the scheme, it will threaten those young people's chances.
Absolutely right. And in my constituency, those young people, they want better jobs, better paid jobs. They don't want our wages being suppressed.
All of them to give way.
Of course, I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
You've talked a lot about European young people wanting to come to the UK. What about the many British young people that would like to go to Europe, to Berlin, to Paris, to Milan? Those people from Boston and Skegness that would like to study overseas. What does he say to those people?
Well, as I was just mentioning earlier, he'd be most welcome. Come and knock on 1,000 doors with me in Boston or Skegness, and I promise you, I don't think any of them will be rushing out. That's not their primary aim. Their primary aim is to get a good job here in this constituency, because they're very proud of their constituency. So I've talked about 4 surrenders. I'm going to move on to surrender 5. Delighted to give way to the honourable lady.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have spent quite a lot of time in Spalding and Skegness, but that's not what I wanted to ask about. I'd be very happy to knock on thousands of doors there. But is the honourable member absolutely certain that there is nobody in his constituency that would like to take up the opportunity of having an experience in the European Union?
Well, the honourable lady infers that we're unable to go to the EU. Of course you can travel to the EU, but what I'm referring to is the fact that what people want is in their neighbourhood, near home, they want the ability to get a good job with good pay prospects. And at the moment, that is the reality that we are not getting. That's what people focus on. I'm besieged by requests. The honourable lady, come.
The honourable lady who wants to go back to Skegness Seaside at some point to remember her childhood. So you haven't. Sorry. The honourable member hasn't answered my question about certainty that there is nobody in their constituency that could possibly benefit from a youth experience scheme that could give them and actually enhance their employment opportunities when they come back to the UK.
Thank you. Well, look, the honest truth is yes, there might be some, but I tell you what, the honourable lady. But the truth is, what they don't want is 10 or 20 or 50 times more coming into Boston or Skegness and taking their jobs and suppressing their wages. That is the reality of my constituents, Madam Chair. But I must move on to the surrender 5, which is, of course, the much vaunted... Surrender 4 or surrender 5? I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
A moment ago, the honourable gentleman said that he's yet to see a Japanese or a Uruguayan or an Australian in Boston and Skegness. What makes him think that European young people would be more likely to hitch up there?
Richard Tice.
The basis of experience and history over the last 19 years, since 2004 and the transition 8, I think it was, when Boston and Skegness has seen a huge inflow of tens of thousands and thousands of East Europeans. So look, the reality is, as we move on to surrender point 5, this is with regard to the emissions trading scheme, which is, as we speak, driving up the price of the carbon tariffs towards the EU's carbon tariff. And why do we want these tariffs? Oh, I know. It's because of net stupid zero. I'm delighted to give way to the honourable lady.
Can I just ask him to clarify? Did he say tens of thousands of Europeans were coming in? Is that an accurate figure? Richard Tice.
Yes, I did use that figure within my constituency of probably over 10,000. It's a very sizable number. It's probably one of the greatest recipients in any constituency of the UK. So I will stand by that number. And I move on to surrender point 5, which is the EU transmission trading scheme, which that is going to actually, it's just going to drive up prices. Whereas, of course, if you don't subscribe to net zero, then actually you don't need any of these carbon tariffs, and that drives down prices. And what is going to happen by linking ourselves, handcuffing ourselves to this EU carbon trading scheme, is that the bureaucrats in Brussels, they are going to say, well, in all these other areas to do with trading, we're going to have to comply with this and that and the other. This is the thin end of the wedge, where every time, just let me finish, every time there is something where they don't like this. No, under the EU net zero trading scheme, you're going to have to comply. That is the thin end of the wedge that we are so concerned about. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Giving way. He hasn't mentioned the many businesses and many confederations of businesses that have welcomed this deal. But you're talking about energy. One energy company that talked about this was Octopus Energy, that said it would bring down people's energy bills rather than increasing them. What would he say to consumers that would prefer their energy bills to be lower?
What I would say to the honourable gentleman is that the renewable energy industry is receiving subsidies of over £10 billion, which is added to all our household bills. The wholesale cost of energy is about between 30 and 35% of the total cost of energy. All of the rest is subsidies, policy costs, transmission costs and profit. So if you scrap net stupid zero, you drive down the prices. Instead, this will actually, it will handcuff us ever more to higher bills. It won't reduce bills in any way at all. I think the honourable lady from Walthamstow wishes to come back at me.
I'm also asking just because, as a proud member of Community Trade Union, and indeed all the other trade unions who represent those who work in the steel industry and many of those who will work at the Scunthorpe Works, what does he say to them when they are campaigning for this? Because they recognise, as I said, 75% of our steel exports go to the EU, so that if he cuts off their access to the EU market by making them pay an additional subsidy, he will kill the British steel industry. Does he not have any words of comfort for them about where their jobs will go?
Actually, the honourable lady may have forgotten that it was thanks to our intervention that British steel has been saved and the blast furnaces have now been saved because we stood there 6 years ago. I said don't sell British steel to the Chinese, but the Conservative government ignored our advice. Actually, what British Steel have consistently said to me over the last 6 years is that it is the cost of energy that drives up the price of steel, and that is the reason why the quantity of steel that we have produced in this country in the last decade has plummeted, because of our high cost of energy, because of the ever-increasing cost of renewable energy. So that is the key problem. It is not, it is about the cost of energy, and that is what has driven down the production of steel, which has reduced by, I think, about half in the last decade. That's why they're so cross with the cost of energy. The opportunity for us is to manufacture and sell more steel here internally into the UK. But the tragedy is, for example, the Ministry of Defence doesn't use either of our two key steel producers as a critical supplier, neither Tata Steel nor British Steel, which it should. Why? Because they're uncompetitive. Why? Because of the cost of energy in our own domestic market. So Surrender 5 is the EU trading scheme, which will be, over the next few years, which will be a serious handicap and handcuff. And then Surrender 6 is the passport e-gates, which I know causes some interest, but the reality is that, once again, nothing has been agreed. This is supposedly the great benefit, and yet it turns out it's not agreed. We have no idea when it might commence. Is it this year? Is it next year? And then it turns out no country is obligated to sign up to the supposed access through the e-gates. No, it will be a voluntary process. So actually, we haven't agreed the benefit that we've all been told is the greatest opportunity from the deal. So, in other words, once again, little has been agreed and everything has been conceded. And interestingly, the truth is, at the moment, even before this deal, some nations have already allowed us through e-gates, like Portugal. So they already had that opportunity that supposedly is the great benefit of this deal that it turns out they already had. So why do the deal in the first place? The reason this deal has been done, despite all of these great surrenders, Madam Chair, is because this is a Prime Minister who actually didn't want us to leave the EU. In fact, more than that, he didn't want to trust democracy. He wanted to do it again by having a second referendum. And this is a Prime Minister that at one week he says he wants freedom of movement and more immigration, and then the next week he says he wants less immigration. It's hard to keep up. But what we know, I would be delighted to give way to the Honourable.
I am so disappointed, Mrs McVeigh, and a pleasure to serve under you, that we've heard from the Honourable Gentleman and others on the other side. Surrender, sinister, stupid. Nicely alliterative. But let me give him three other words. What about cheaper, faster and more opportunities. This is what this brings, and this is what will bring to the young people of Boston and Skegness as much as it will to the young people of Hackney South and Shoreditch.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her intervention, but I am absolutely certain that as a result of this deal, nothing will be cheaper. Indeed, we're already seeing the carbon price has gone up, which gives us the first indication. So look, I don't think that this is going to be the great opportunity. I think this is, at the beginning of this week, a catastrophic surrender. We worked so hard to give ourselves freedom of control, freedom from Brexit. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Why does he think that nearly every major supermarket disagrees with him?
That's a very good question. What I do know is in my constituency, no one has been in touch. The big logistics companies, the big farmers, none of the supermarkets have got in touch with me. They know my position. Not a single one, Madam Chair, has got in touch with me and says, Richard, you're wrong on this. This is a great deal. So maybe actually the Prime Minister and the government have overstated this point. And maybe what's happened here is that the great opportunities of Brexit, the ability to take back control, be a sovereign nation and make our own independent sovereign deals that we got excited about under the government's leadership last week has all now, it's been given up. It's been strangled. It's been handcuffed. And handcuffed to what? To a failing economic model where the biggest economy, Germany, is in recession, is struggling. It's got even more problems than our own economy. Why, I ask everybody, why would you handcuff yourself to a failing economic model forevermore? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now, I didn't put speeches at the start of this debate, but we've had so many interventions and it's a feisty exchange that it's eaten into the time, so time limits now will